morning. Also, Selamat Hari Malaysia to all participants. Welcome to Heritage and Conservation Talk, entitled Fire Safety in Heritage Buildings. Fire safety in building has always been an exciting and recurring subject of discussion among architects, engineers, local authorities, building owners, fire departments, and also insurance providers. But talking about fire safety specifically in heritage building is much more interesting and endless and sometimes pointless discussion. It can lead to a conflict between laws governing fire safety provision in buildings and the rules and principles in conserving and preserving heritage buildings or enclosed structures as well as monuments. Because of the growing demands for seminars related to fire safety in heritage buildings, PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee, or better known as PAM HCC, has taken the initiative to organize another excellent talk by two esteemed speakers who are very experienced and well-versed in the subject matters. They are architect Thang, Boon, and engineer Hao-giang Tay. So before we go any further, let me briefly explain how the talk will be conducted today. So the first speaker will deliver his speech for about 40 minutes, and then followed by the second speaker will also present his talk for 40 minutes. Then we will have a 25 minutes Q&A session. So I hope that participants can drop their question in a Q&A tab. You can see in your screen there's a Q&A tab and also a chat tab. But if you have any question, just drop your question in a Q&A tab only before the end of the second speaker's talk. So we will pick up your question from there. If you drop in a chat box, we're going to miss it. Okay, please make sure your question is short, precise, and straight to the point. It cannot be a very long question because time limitation that we have. And the speaker will answer questions based on a first come, first served basis. And also the question must be relevant to the topics of the webinar. And of course, subject to the availability of time. And our first speaker today is architect Thang. He is the director of NVT Architects Sdn Bhd. Architect Steven is currently a PAM council member and also a chairman of Heritage and Conservation Committee, chairman of ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee. It's also an honorary treasurer of Ecomos Malaysia and numerous other committees in PAM and also in government agencies. So he has a vast experience in conservation work in Malaysia. Therefore, now I invite architect Steven to present his topic titled Understanding the Guidelines to Fire Safety for Heritage Buildings. Please welcome architect Steven. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can hear me quite clear. Welcome to this video on fire safety for heritage buildings. It's one of the most talked about subject when it comes to heritage buildings. And we need to know how we overcome and how to address the issues and the do's and don'ts of it. So basically today I will just take you to just on the concept, because our time is not very much. I have about 40 minutes to discuss this thing, and just a concept, and then I'll just take you through the draft of the what I call it, our guidelines, fire safety guidelines. Still under development because of the MCO. We have stopped. Otherwise, it would have been published last year, mid last year, 2020. And we are still waiting for this so that we can meet. I think it'll be more fruitful. We meet up with the stakeholders in a physical form. So we hope that probably end of the year or so, we can meet up and continue and finish it up. But nevertheless, I will continue today to the other half of my talk to go through with you the gist of the draft, so you have a better understanding of where we are coming from. So I'll share the slides now. Okay. Welcome you again. So today we are talking about fire safety approach and preservation of heritage buildings. So one of the things that we are concerned. Okay, Steve doesn't want to move. Okay, now how do we go about? What are the priorities? Is it live or is it the preservation board building or the heritage building that we are concerned of? So which comes first? In our meeting, we agreed that the Bomba brought up and said life comes first, second the building, which I think we more or less all agreed that to that principle. So that comes first. That is the basic principle. So in this illustration that we have put there, so your fire risk assessment will protect this, and but will it protect this? So in the current fire codes available or applicable in our nation, protection of life comes first. You must evacuate the person to safety as soon as possible in the most safely manner. So the building can sometimes go on burning, but to us, it is a double-edged sword. Because one is life, the other one is a property that you cannot afford to lose. So it is a game of a high risk stake. Huh? I have to use the word, because one thing is that once it's burned, it's no longer there. You can't appreciate it, and a part of our heritage is will be gone. So these are the things that we have to consider. And just to give you up that these slides were taken in the 2018, 2019. So 2020, there was not much activity. I'm not sure of any incident. It could be less because of all these places are all closed down due to the pandemic. But nevertheless, once these things start to go full swing, then all these things may have a problem. So heritage properties are at risk from a number of hazards, but undoubtedly one of the most destructive is fire. So if you look at this simple chart which I've made, you can see that throughout the whole year, there is at least a fire somewhere in the world. And these are all heritage. So each year, we are losing bit by bit of this heritage building due to fire. And there's nothing we can do to unless we do a total reconstruction, a replica of the original building. But again, the sentiment of the feeling, the emotional feeling of the building will be lost. What I call it, it's different. Having a feel of the original building and a replica of the building. Okay, so these are all is happening, and again, so we ask ourselves, when you do the building, heritage building, readaptive use or otherwise, what are the chances of this building will be destroyed by fire among the many threats there are? So with that in mind, we have to consider a lot of things which I will go through, and also engineer Tiongel will also go through. He is more on the performance of how the fire will trigger fire and what it does. What I'm going through is basically more on the concepts and the flow thoughts of how to do it. Okay, most of these readily available solutions to correct fire protection problems, the other type, may not be practical in case of heritage building. As you can see, the three illustrations, there are three different types now. There's only three different types, but there are further other types, more complicated building. Complicated because some of the early buildings are, say, of pure timber structures. So those has a very high degree of potential to be threatened by fire, small fire, which envelope, which I'll show you in illustration afterwards. So again, These three are iconic buildings in Malaysia, and they enjoy some heritage. We call it heritage sort of recognition. The Twin Tower, of course, is quite a fairly new building, but it's still considered as our first high rise in Malaysia. Is an iconic building, so therefore it's very like it is can be considered to be a heritage building, just like a Parliament House and then a Carcosa. Now, this is another category of buildings of unique character. The one that you see is the Gedung Abdullah in Klang. Then the one in Malacca, and there are shop lots, typically of shop lots throughout Malaysia, east and west as well. Now, these buildings, what do they represent? As you are aware of, as a heritage person who works in heritage building, you need to protect the integrity of the building, the originality of the building as to what it was at the time, as far as your documentation allow you to keep it or conserve it to that particular time. So by doing that, you are also preserving the materials of the building. So a lot of these buildings were constructed without codes at that time. Very little, none at all building codes. No consideration for fire safety at that time. In fact, Kuala Lumpur was wiped out I think in the 1800s at one time for fire, or buildings were very closely built, and they were all timber. So that kind of hazard still prevails today, which I will show you in a while. So gedung is primarily of bricks, wall, brick pier, and also timber, trusses and all that. So it has a high potential of fire. So the provision of post rails, but again, by having those active and passive system, but what happened, will the building be burned? So you need to put in that in the draft of the guidelines, which I will show you later. We will have that consideration, and it's one of the checklists of what we need to do. I'll go that. So just this a brief of how this influence our thoughts into our guidelines. So you can see the shop lots also in some areas. I know in Penang at least, maybe in Malacca as well. We have zero back lane. So that is another potential hazard. So how do we address those issues? And those lots are very long, narrow and long. They are, I think, easily 100 feet, if not more. And it's narrow, 20 feet or less, and there's no back lane. So how do you address those issues? Readaptation, even you stay as a house, also is a potential. So these are things that you need to give our thoughts on how we would address this issue on to get egress the people out during the emergency. How, and there are of course ways of doing it, but then everything always comes at the cost of the equipment, firefighting equipment, and also space to be allocated for running away, for just like a safe room or safe area before you can then channel yourself out to the open in the front. So this all has this sort of cost and space. All also that boils down to cost. How much money you are really willing to sacrifice or put in to achieve, to preserve that one. Okay, this is a very tragic of this house. A very long time ago was burned down many years ago, Rumah Pak Ali, and you can see a newspaper. It was a cry. This was burned down due to electrical fault, as I was made to understand. And tourists still, now of course the structure is no longer there, but when it was just burned, tourists who have already made arrangement to drop by, they also take a photograph and said, look, I was there. So again, see, Malaysia don't have many more heritage house, unlike those countries in Europe and all. If we keep continuing burning one by one, there's nothing left for us to be proud of our heritage. Nothing to show our future generations how we live, how was it construction, and how all these things will be lost if we don't take care of it. Okay, So this is one of them. So again, electrical hazard is one of the high threat to all this. This is very recent. If I remember, it's 2019. Sungai Lembing, two lives were lost. A couple, elderly couple, and because of the proximity of the building, they're all timber structures. Uh, Fire just raised too fast before the fire engines could come. They have a volunteer firemen in this small little town in Pahang. So they may not have the right equipment to fight this fire, and the early warning was inadequate. And because of its timber structure, the spread of flame is so high, it just consumed many units. And so this part of this frontal in this Wellaming town, and now it's gone. So if you erect the new building, so part of this heritage has lost already. Sungai Lembing is already under threat. A lot of its original building as a tin mining town has really lost a lot of building to new development, and all this discarded building that just go into ruin and then destroyed. So again here, it's just a simple one night, and I think it's due to electrical fault. One whole stretch of building were being destroyed, and how the ambience of the town itself has lost some its flavor of its originality. So you cannot afford this, and sadly, it's also a loss of two lives in this case. So we have to think about how to preserve this and what kind of fighting equipment needs to be introduced as soon as possible, and also training of people. So these are this is called Petang. You can see the aerial shots of the village, fishing village. See how close the building are. It has some heritage in the sense that these buildings were there for a very long time, and it also had formerly was known as Portwell. Only the sign is left. That train station is no longer there. Incidentally, it's relevant because this town is the rail line from Portwell to Taiping is one of the early railroad line. Of course, it's no longer a railroad now. But again, because of the closeness of this building, if anyone have been there, you can walk by, and it's so close by. There's no fire break or none so whatever. Yes, you can see hydrants being laid out. But how does the hydrant going to help? Are people there been trained to use? Who are the people who are being trained? In case of fire, people start to panic. Will it hinder the people who are volunteers who are trained to do to use the hydrant and the hose and the reels and all that? How to fight the fire? So all these things need to be considered, and these are all we can see as a potential fire hazard, and you can wipe up the whole town, as you can see from the next slide. See, this is in I think it's Sabah, and you can see how the flame. This is all traditional village over water, and I think in Sandakan also you have this similar village, and they have installed I think something like hose reel in there. But again, question is this things, the flame starts very fast because of the material is made of timbers, primary timber. So again, question is, although you have provisions for this, who is going to fight the fire? Because you wait for the firemen to come up and then run along the small narrow lane, and you don't know where the fire is first. You need somebody to lead it to you. The people, are they trained to use it? How to fight the fire? You contain the fire, or just pour water into the fire? Does it help? So technical know-how to fight fire must be taught to these people who stay there, and the crucial people. You must have an organization chart of who to call, who to what, who's doing what and what. So at least if anything emergency on fire, the right people will then able to fight the fire properly. So if not, this thing in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, everything will be gone. Yeah. If there's lucky, if there's no life loss, but the whole village is gone, and there is no longer a village soon, diminished. So this sort of traditional living style will also vanish in due time. Okay, sorry. Okay, another point of interest and danger we always look at is on the photograph you can see is Jonker Street or some other street in certain towns also they have this sort of a celebration. You see the slides, the picture on the lower left is typical of this is now the village in those floating village, small town. This one is taken in Kuala Sipatang. See how close the buildings are, and flame can just leap across to each other and go to a neighbor so easily. It's all timber, so no way if people can get trapped inside between the house if it's spread the other way around, and this the lorong that you're using is blocked by flame. So that is super dangerous. So we need to consider the escape route, how to do it, so there's a lot of things need to be taught about this to give advice to people so that everybody can have a peace of mind and sleep and in future as well. So coming back to the two pictures above, why I'm putting out this picture is because all it seems very nice and for the pedestrian mall, but I see it as a threat to fire. In the case of fire, this so-called interesting place for pedestrian and tourists alike are so dangerous. Simply why? Because the fire engine cannot come in. Say one of the lots of shop lot got fire in the middle of this whole street. The fire engine cannot come in. We'll run around with the hose reel to bring in. So again, question is whether people are prepared for this or this fire, the threat of fire. Have they done a mock-up trial to ensure that you can reach and fight the fire within 5 minutes, or that is supposed to be a standard SOP, that you can hit that time and how you contain the fire from spreading. So all this needs to be thought of, and it's all very nice and beautifully designed, but the thoughts of fire also must be considered, how you will fight the fire in case there is a fire. Okay. Okay, this is another typical continuity of just now. You can see well, this was a good time. Now maybe less people, so less threat. But again, when the things by 1 or 2 years time, the momentum build up again, you will have this problem. See the people, the stores, the jungle street, the midnight, what you call that, the pasar malam. They're, yes, all very interesting, but they can be a total hazard. Look at the planter box along the street on the lower left photograph. How the fire engine will come in? With the electrical wires hanging above. So all these are potential hazards that when you consider designing for a place, also please consider the fire. So you must have a plan also to ease the firefighting service rescue, fire and rescue people to come in to address it, to attack the fire, and not let them come in and there is no plan for them. How are they going to get in there? So we must have the lower photograph on the right one. You see how close, how narrow the streets are. You park the car there, and sometimes even the emergency vehicle like a heavy bomba also cannot go through. So how are we going to address the issue? These are all had to be thought of. How to go at one side parking, so that is still but then again, people must understand regulations must be made, that you cannot simply park anywhere you like. It must be controlled so that the passage is clear. I think if you go around Malaysia or something similar, people just park there and just can't be bothered. So what are you going to do? I think there was some video that went viral sometime last year or year before. somebody parked the car until the fire engine cannot go through. So it takes a while before the owner comes and remove his car with fire. Then that's too late already. So these type of things have to be thought of how and whether there's an alternative design for the fire engine to come into this to contain a fire. Okay, another one that's also a very potential. I think these things will catch on very soon. This one, the next slides will show. Okay, this is in Turkey. Recently, they make it so colorful, so nice. You see the atmosphere is so nice, and the fabric itself help to contain the sun, hot sun coming through. So it's very nice, cooling, shaded area in a way, bright and shaded. But I look at a different way of saying that this is a total fire threat, totally. Fabric burns easily, and not only you just burn, you burn, and then because of the heat and then the rising air, will bring this burning fabric to the neighboring houses as well, which you cannot control where you're going to burn, where you're going to fly to. You carry out by the wind. So this is a potential, unless there is reason to say that you spray this cloth into a fire flame retardant treatment to this fabric, that it will not propagate fire, will not cause ignition of fire, then perhaps. But then again, how long this thing, the chemical that you apply to this fabric, how long this chemical can last? Because it will rain, shine, and all this. So if it's the chemical is good only for say 6 months, then you need to have a very strong or strict what I call it SOP that people will come in to apply it again every 6 months dutifully, so that you will make sure that when there's a flame, it will not burn, right? So these are super danger thing. You know, it looks nice, but you must consider the fire as well. Look at this as well. So can you imagine? Some of you have seen some trailer of an Indian movie of a war. Those days where this guy just coat the fabric like a big curtain with oil and shoot it across the enemy soldiers, and they contain inside there. And I light it up, and all the people are all roasted alive. And this thing can happen at the same time. Can you imagine the whole fabric here just collapse and trap everyone in it. It burn you. It's scary to have the thought that. So even you see this, you might not sure whether you're gonna go under this or not after what I tell you and all these things. So again, so you have to be very careful on how to maintain and what is safe. And you can do things like that, but you must consider how and all that. See, when you you put all those things in the street, now these are all traditional, these are all intangible heritage things. So you got tangible and intangible. These are intangible. So you won't see people still cooking like this old man here cooking with the charcoal fire here, flaming sparks flying all over. So it has a flavor of heritage. It's all nice and good. But can you imagine you start doing it in one of the streets? Now I show it to you. Flame flying all over. The fabric is here, there, and all these things are highly combustible materials flying around here and there. So a lot of this decoration are temporary materials, which are also very high combustible, easily ignite. So how are we going to address this thing? You want to show off in one thing that these are traditional, all good, but how do you contain the fire there is? So you have to consider all these things, what can burn and all this. So as a designer, or developer of this area, you have to consider how to contain these things. See here, one of the temples is very dangerous things. The temple, the Chinese, they like to burn the incense. Also, they burn paper, which I've seen that it start to fly into the sky with single fire. They flew to the sky. It can carry on to a neighbor if there's a strong wind. So again, these are all fire hazard. So these are all cultural necessary, but how to contain them? There are people who build little structures that you can burn inside the structures, and so they contain this paper do not fly all over. But you can see this illustration during big festival, it just go beyond what is provided. So they start burning on floors and all this. They have a water jet, they have a fire extinguisher standby in case of these things out of control. But you cannot stop this thing from flying. But once it goes airborne, you don't know where it's going to fly to. And you just hope that and pray that the flame of this thing is being carried fizzles out before it reaches, before it landed somewhere else. So that's the only thing you comfort. But if you can burn longer and then you travel further, or the next one, next door only, not even further. So these are all consideration, although you do this, but consideration must be given on the hazard of this. One on the left is very nice, burn, flame, but it can be also a flame, what I call it a threat. So these are control, uncontrolled things. Okay, very quickly, like I said, the electrical constitute one of the highest problem for heritage house, because some heritage house still maintain the old wiring in it. And what happened is that the usage and the demand of current has increased, while some of the old wiring are left in place. They've added new wirings. So the old wirings may have can have a lot of resistance. So then when the current flow through it, because of the high resistance, you will go heat it up and you will burn the plastic, the PVC that goes around it, may burn. So things are potential fire, and a lot of old buildings are also haphazardly extended with fire, with these electrical wires not well connected, loose connection. So loose connections are also can trigger off fire, because a loose connection, there is a lot of sparks and heat build up, as you can see what I show you on the top left. I circle it. You see that the wire is getting heated up at the connection there. So after a while, it will then burst into a flame, and this switch box can be a source of fire. So here again, the connection of people along here and there, they just arbitrarily connecting things. A lot of times they do not know. They just get a wireman comes in and do the connection. And sometimes they didn't do a good connection. They use sometimes they do an improper connection of bare wires and just use a PVC tape to tape around it, thinking that it's good. But it's only as good as and we don't know when the thing can trigger, the thing come loose and cause this friction and the sparks, and then the heat build up because of this loose connection. So again, these are all hazards. So you need to employ competent electrician to do it, and also to make sure that all your appliances are all balanced. Now, most of the picture I show you all are triggered off, but more or less electrical. So 1/3 of all accidental fires in restaurants, faulty electrical wiring and equipment or improper use equipment. So this is only for restaurant. What about residential and other buildings of heritage? So we need to take note of these things. Again, another picture, congestion for emergency vehicle, they can't move in. So then the fireman has to manually run with the hose in hand instead of fire engine goes straight directly there. So this is a problem, especially in a small village and all that. So make sure that when they design that fire engine can have a proper access. Even nowadays, I see that some of the big development also they allow a 6 meter from the 6 meter wide, but they forgot that they are super high building. So again, we have this problem. And then when you start to use it, the owners or the person who ran it will then put heavy pots of plant and this and that, and it sort of block off the access to this emergency vehicle. And don't forget, every seconds count. So you just block them off while the fire is ongoing. Every second you block him, the thing will just get worse. Okay, this is a very famous fire, an icon in Paris, Notre Dame Cathedral, which was burned. The whole roof was gone, and now left the shell. And I think they have gone for a redesign competition, and they're going to redo it because it's so iconic. But the whole thing is that this building, the originality has now gone. Only what you have is photograph. So this was apparently was appeared to be fire from. I'm not sure maybe Mr. Tay has the latest on this report. My one was just after the fire that came out. This and this is a you see that the person must be a competent person looking after. Even you have one of the best systems of firefighting or alarm. It's useless if the person is not competent to use it or know about the system. So every minute counts, and if you read this properly, they went on the wild goose chase, where the alarm goes off and where the actual fire when it was still small. And after running here and there, only after 30 minutes, they look at the fourth para. Only 30 minutes later, the cathedral staff realized they made a mistake and sent the guards to the attic, also known as the forest because of its aged timber beams of the roof truss. Only the fire was already in full swing, so you see that time is of essence. So people must be properly trained how to look for fire and how to get access and all that. Sometimes gates are closed. How you know? There must be an equipment or tool around there to actually open the gate so that you all can get access to do the necessary rescue. So one of the biggest things we need is risk assessment. I don't have many, but I'll just run through. Risk assessment is very important. In all of this heritage, we building these guidelines are all assessed on the risk assessment. Okay, so protection of content, the rate one are the important. Protection of building, protection of content, needs of building's owner. So these are the first thing. Then after that, adequate means of escape. Then complying with law and regulation, needs of fire and rescue services. So all these are part and parcel of what will be your concept of how to address the firefighting. Okay. So fire safety risk assessment, the first 5. So identify the fire hazard, then identify the source of ignition, source of fuel, and source of oxygen. Identify people at risk, who are they, especially when you have universal, whether they're disabled people. So how are you going to allow them? Are they, what I'm saying to say that if you allow somebody going to old building, elderly, or those are what I call that, OKU people in there, so how are you going to address them? How are they in a panic? How are they going to be evacuated from the building? So these are all need to be considered. That's why we have to follow the UBBL. UBBL, the universal design, and the fire is part and parcel now of the UBBL. So you can't run away from that. So 2, identify people, like just said. 3 is evaluate, remove, or reduce and protect from risk. Evaluate the risk of fire starting, evaluate the risk of people. Risk of fire starting is make sure that all the connections, electrical especially, that they are all well sealed up in trunks and all well proper and well connected with the proper connections being used, and not just using bare wire and twist and then wrap it up with PVC. That is sometimes not a good thing to do. So you identify the fire hazard and fire potential, including electrical, heat, naked flame source. So these are the few things you need to consider. Just very quickly point, report on any of your domestic appliances that appear on the product recall. So people must be there. for management to make sure all these things are proper. The fire extinguisher are properly charged or recharged, all the time, but making sure they're not expired. So advice on the escape plans in event of fire, how to escape, what to escape, make sure the passage are all clear. I've been to some places and I see that they end up as partial store for these escape routes, staircase, lorong, and all that. So again, that poses a big danger on these things. So let's go into the fire safety guidelines for heritage building. It's 2020 because supposed to be launched last year, but because MCO again, we had to postpone it. So hopefully by the end of this year sometime, so we can get it moving again. So the guidelines has actually into 5. First part is jurisdiction, law, regulation for heritage building. Part 2, classification, purpose group, and category of building. And part 3 is approaches in dealing with adaptive reuse heritage building. Part 4 is fire safety and prevention. And part 5, management and prevention. So how does it go about now? So where the source, these are the source of power that we use for our guidelines. So we have to follow this law. We cannot change the law. So these are some examples. Law of Malaysia, the Arahan, and the UVBL, and National Heritage Act. So these are the source of power that we have to observe. So in this, we have the also federal government is gazette electrical under the EC. So we must follow that also. There's a lot of questions being asked. Why we can't chase we shouldn't chase the wiring into the wall that most people because that is nice and smooth wall. But we can't do that because you are intervention already. This is called intervention. It means you are changing the very fabric, original fabric of the heritage building. That is because so we don't chase them, but we expose the conduit. So you make sure that the conduits are all approved conduits, and the wires are all approved wires, all channeled inside into the and expose it. It's okay. So that you don't touch and change the character of the originality. So again, the Fire Service Act 1988, this is moving. So in this preparation of this, we have the stakeholders. These are the list of stakeholders. Yes, you can see many of them. So because this document is very important to all of them, so we have these stakeholders. Now, other than these stakeholders, we also, the committee also refer to a few other documents. For example, the NFPA 914, and also the IAFF SS, which is Hong Kong, and also the UNESCO has a committee on this Convention 1972 talk about the threats. So this fall under the threats. And we also look at the study the others of Scotland, Singapore, and also the European guidelines, because this European especially, they have many old buildings, so they have restarted all these things. And some of this we enjoy seeing some of these documents for the simplicity it is. So we do not want to go to such detail like the FPA, the American one, but we choose to go on a much simpler guidelines, much easier. So this is part 1, jurisdiction. So it's a write-up. We give some of the guide that where are we using it, so where and how. So A is a federal level of the Act and all those we need to follow. B is state level, they may have local laws. And C, of course, international and other guidelines and references. So the conventions of Venice Charter, Convention of UNESCO Heritage Site, Hao-giang Protocol, all these things needs to be addressed. So it's a balancing between all these you have to pick. So this is part 1 to tell you that these you need to follow. So the main objective of this fire safety and heritage are life safety first, whereby to give sufficient time for occupant to get safety, minimize damage or loss caused by fire, and if possible to preserve the original quality of heritage building. So that is the main purpose of this document. So in the bylaw, we are looking at part 2, submission of plans for approval. In the end, I will show you why we need that. Then the part 7, fire requirement, and part 8, fire alarm, fire detection, and all those things. So in part 2, classification, purpose group, category, but this category purpose group are not necessarily the uniform building bylaw, the schedule of this purpose group of building. No. So we have 2.2. We have this building appraisal of the material that is existing, and then purpose group.
Architect Steven,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, we have 5 more minutes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, 2.4 is category of building, right? So the uniform bylaw third schedule also talk about the what, and the fourth schedule, fifth schedule destination, and then sixth schedule calculation permitted. All these are then have to be observed. So you cannot just introduce a staircase somewhere in the old building just because of to satisfy UBL. But then in UNESCO area, sometimes this thing doesn't work. You introduce a staircase, then your building is a breach of the UNESCO already. So then part 3 is a balanced approach, alternative approach, and principle accepting alternative design. So something, of course, something short of a performance in a way. So all the things that is needed. So a balanced approach, successful conservation of heritage building requires an optimal balance between the degree of conservation and type of adaptive reuse, and on extent of alteration and additional works proposed. Okay, then principle accepting alternative design. Very often to achieve fire safety, fire engineering approach may be adopted to work on alternative design. Mr. Tay will go into that much more in detail. Just that here, I just tell that we need to look into that. So part 4 is fire safety and prevention. We have passive systems and also performance-based, and also we are looking at an active system to help out also. So this one, this is more technical and uniform bylaw again. So we have seen some very elaborate systems in Japan, but these are too expensive for us. So that we need to look at other places. Fire and all that, Mr. Tay will talk about it. So fire control system, the passive, active, design of building, portable extinguishers. So most of you are aware of the passive and active. So use them a lot. So the final part is the management operation. This is very important because this is after you have delivered the building, is in use. This is where the important is to make sure the guidelines are being observed and everything is just like the fire certificate in the newer buildings now, high rise and all that. So we also want to introduce this. So all those people complied. So it's a license every year. There is inspection or 2 years. That is still being considered by the committee on these things. So that the things are all in place. These are all checklists, daily check, but these are all still in the deliberation. Some may find that the daily check is a bit too tedious. So the organization chart, so all these are checklists, simple samples, it means a warning, escape, all those signages, all these have to be proper. So if you want to make sure that there is a follow-up and all this, and not building that you go after 3 years, there's nothing left, all to change, people use this, other users and all that. So this is a checklist of all these internal flame spread and all this. So all this will be inside the guidelines that when it's published, all this will be there so that it's clear to what you need to do and what you can do. So external fire spread, risk of external fire spread predominantly. So water mist, Mr. Tay will talk again on those things, pushing a lot of this. These are all fire protection, firefighting purposes. So access facility for fire brigade, make sure that they can and how fast they can reach their place. Don't hinder them. Okay. Key points incorporated with fire safety management plans, measures identified during the prevention step are regularly revisit. That's what I was saying, to prevent fires from developing. Maintenance schedule to ensure protective measures put in place are still capable of performing as intended. These are all common sense things, but only common sense things, but need to be followed up. Otherwise, it becomes uncommon sense already. So risk assessment. Not every hero will escape. Plans and practice of escape. So regular planning. Let's say we have ongoing now drills and all that. So the staff of this building, the adaptive building, heritage building knows what to do in case of any fire, day and night. The evacuation plan, mimic diagram. So HR safety and security solution. Even that's why earlier the OKU must be addressed, because in terms of fire, they are also at risk. So lastly, this word, stop erasing our history with fire. And with that, I say thank you very much. Back to you, Dato.
Yeah, thank you very much, Architect Stephen, for a very excellent presentation. Okay, you have taken us through many states in Malaysia, and also to Turkey and Paris. All right. Okay. A few things that I want to highlight here from what was presented by Architect Stephen. So when designing, the architect or designers have to consider accessibility of fire and rescue vehicles. So that's the first thing that has been presented by Architect Stephen. And in a few slides, he has shown photos of very congested lane or roads in heritage quarters. And the second thing was on fabric sunshade. That one I think is very dangerous. Also, although it looks nice, but it can be a very dangerous element which can cause a big fire outbreak. And the third one is a hazard in kitchen. Many of the buildings, especially in like in Penang or in Malacca, they've gone through adaptive reuse from shop house. They changed to restaurant, and then so they have to be very careful with that. And then also the burning incense in temples. And the fifth item is electrical hazard. Yeah. Okay. So one thing that I need to highlight here is that the fire safety risk assessment. There are 5 important things inside the fire safety risk assessment, and it's important to be carried out and reviewed regularly. That was mentioned by Architect Stephen just now. And then lastly, PAM, in collaboration with other stakeholders, is working on producing a guideline to fire safety for heritage buildings, and it is scheduled to be released soon. It's been quite sometimes already. We're working on that together with fire departments, local authorities from Penang, from JB, Malacca, and many other stakeholders involved in coming up with that guideline. Okay, so we have heard from Architect Stephen mostly on the local scenario, Gombak, Rumah Pak Ali in Gombak, Selangor, Sungai Lembing, and then going back to Portwell, Perak, and then Sabah Water Village, and Jonker Street in Malacca. Then I think Istanbul in Turkey. I'm not sure whether Istanbul or other place. And then Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. So it's very interesting. So we're going to go for the second presentation by our second speaker. So our second speaker is a qualified and experienced fire engineer. He is engineer Hao-giang Tay, and he is a principal fire consultant with Fire Safety Engineering Sdn Bhd. And Engineer Tay is currently a vice president of the Institution of Fire Engineers Malaysia branch, and he is the past international president of the Institution of Fire Engineers. He has co-authored the famous Red Book, Guide to Fire Protection in Malaysia. I think, I believe all architects and engineers may have at least one copy in the office. So in my office, I have two copies. One is to be kept in our library. The second one is you can take home whenever we require. Very useful. Okay, and Engineer Tay is an active speaker giving talks at numerous local and international fire conferences and seminars. And he is also visiting lecturers to many universities, international universities, you know. And then, so I hope his presentation, he will take us to other places outside Malaysia with some interesting scenario, you know, that we can learn from his experience. And today, Engineer Tay will present us with the fire safety approach in preservation of heritage building. So that is the title of his presentation, and I'm pleased to invite Engineer Hao-giang Tay to deliver his talk. Welcome, Engineer Tay.
Morning, Dato. Thank you for your kind invitation. Good morning.
Yeah, good.
Let me share my screen. Can everyone see the screen? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, very clearly.
You notice that this template is actually very new because IFE has just launched our new logo. This is a digital torch logo. We have just launched it since June this year because we used the old logo for the last 100 years. So this is the forward-looking digital logo to be in line with the current digital world. We fire safety professional institution, we always observe and learn from international fire phenomena. And we have discovered that the current fire phenomena during the last quarter of a century has changed from the prescriptive assumption. And it's very, very interesting because we should actually learn from lessons of actual fire scenario and then review from time to time what we have been practicing to move forward. Now, if you look at the fire of origin, up to now, prescriptive code, our UBBL always assume that fire only happened in one source or one location within the building. And that, but unfortunately, that has been proven not true. Since 1996, the first multi-story building happened in Hong Kong, Gali building, where the fire started on the second floor and leapfrogged to 13, 14, and 15 floors. And at first, the officer in command actually thought it's an arson case. Eventually, one of my senior professors was asked to actually conduct a fire investigation and find that actually it's not true. Fire really spread from second, leapfrogged the rest of the floors to 13, 14, and 15 floors. And it took 42 lives with 100 over injured. Second case is actually a Lakana house fire, resulting in 6 fatalities in UK. This is only 14 story, but this is due to lack of compartmentation. A lot of the what they call penetration seals were not properly installed, and there are a lot of openings was left open, not sealed, even after the building has been completed. This happened in 2009. So again, fire happens in 3 different floors and with separation in between. So we have to actually review our assumption now, otherwise the design might not be realistic. And of course, the next woke up the whole world. That is the Grenfell Tower, 24-story residential apartment block with 72 fatalities, which happens in 2017, United Kingdom. And because of this fatality, now the parliament actually review everything, the building regulations, document B, all the laboratory test standards, procedures, and also they are now, the parliament just passed a fire safety bill, probably about a week ago, reviewing a lot of things because they find that there's just too many what they call procedures that is having a lot of loopholes, resulting in the failure of this particular disaster. In between 2009 to 2017, there are so many other fires that happens around the world, and it never stopped, all right, proving that a fire actually can happen in multiple incidents in a particular building. Of course, some of this is due to the external cladding fire that spreads very, very fast. I'll show the photos later on. And as we were speaking, last week, we have a towering inferno in Milan, Italy. 20-story building engulfed in flame. I'll show you a video after this. It's very, very scary, all right? And just within 7 days before the Milan towering inferno, there is a high-rise apartment, the iconic building in Dalian. Dalian is actually a port south of Beijing. And the fire spread so fast. And also it was reported by some of the residents that the water pressure of the firefighting system is grossly insufficient. Okay. So we have also learned through all these fire scenarios, actual fire scenarios, that fire may spread downwards as well. This happened in the Milano towering inferno, where the fire actually occurred on the top floor and then spread sideways and downwards. I'm actually in touch with one of the fire safety consultant in Milan, and she is going to send me the report, which I think will be very, very interesting. She also did a thesis on the reaction of a fire on building materials. I have currently a global network on with all the fire professionals. That's why I'm getting a lot of latest information, news, and also research results. Now, the other factor that actually increases the fire risk is actually potential climatical changes and global warming. Now, if you notice that the scientists are all now fighting tooth and nail with the industrialists on trying to cap the world crust temperature increase to within 2 degrees C, failing which is going to be catastrophic for mankind. So as the ambient temperature rises, we need really to review the safety approach and design because the likelihood of a fire has just gone up multiple fold. This is the Dalian fire. You can see that when the fire started on the lower floor, it spread so fast. And if we are again designing basing on X number of landing valve outlets, you can imagine that it's going to be grossly insufficient, all right? Because we are now dealing with a modern fire of different scale altogether. This happened very, very recently in 2010. And you can see that actually it's very, very sad. This is supposed to be a retired teacher's apartment. They're supposed to enjoy retirement. And the whole building went out in flame, killing 58 of them. I have no time to go into details. We can always look at another chapter. Grenfell Tower actually taught us so many lessons, especially we have just entered into the 20th anniversary of 9/11 disaster, the Twin Towers of New York. And I can tell you, architects and engineers will definitely need to actually look at all these international fire incidents, and then hopefully we can learn very much more into our current design so that at least we improve on the fire safety of any buildings. If you look at the these particular drawings, that is where the hose can reach, all right? It's only about 10 stories, beyond which, if you've got a high-rise building more than 30 meters, you require internal firefighting. So the water supply and water on demand, the pressure from the hose is crucial. Imagine if you are a firefighter fighting a fire on the higher level of the building, all you actually depend on are the water from the hose, all right? Modern fires actually are very ferocious and have very high heat release rate. If you look at this picture, The color of the fire will tell you the temperature roughly, rule of thumb. You have a red, orange, yellow, and white. White fire temperature will be in the range of 900 to 1,000 degrees. And that is equivalent to a test fire in a furnace for doors, for walls, all right? So imagine if you have a fire on outside of the building, everything inside the apartment will be consumed except metal. This is a Milano fire, 20-story, and you can see that it's beautiful building, and yet when it starts to burn, it's scary. This is again an external cladding fire, and these are all the cladding, and you can see that they are all consumed. The interesting part is that the fire happened actually on the top floor, spread across and then downwards. All right, and this is never seen before. I've never seen any fire of this nature, and this actually opens up a new chapter whereby we got to start looking at fire propagation fundamentals and principles. There are so many fires that actually prove that fire never happened. A modern fire never happened in one place in any building. This is the famous Address Hotel that's actually opposite the tallest tower in the world, Burj Khalifa in Dubai. And again, the fire happened on the low floor and it spread so fast, which is another factor that I believe a lot of the designers did not take into consideration. That's the wind shear factor. In the Gulf, the wind is very high. When they hit a building, they move upwards. So the moment you got an external fire, you imagine the fire's propagation rate and the heat release. You look at the color of the fire also is very, very high. It's yellow and white. Luckily, nobody gets hurt. This is Burj Khalifa, all right? And if you look at the density of the residential upper class building here, it's also very, very high. I've been to Dubai several times. I've actually went up to the Burj Khalifa, and I can tell you, I do not what I call appreciate the things that I see. Not so much about Burj Khalifa, but do you know that there is the second largest shopping mall between the Address Hotel and Burj Khalifa, where I can tell you, if you go inside, you will need a ways to get out during a fire incident, all right? It's so huge. Let me show you the it's a video of the Milano fire. Look at the fall off from tower. Looks like war zone, all right? And this is danger of a multi-story building fire, because all these are like missiles, and they can kill, they can damage, they can spread fire onto the next building. So a fire, we are not only looking at the building on fire, but also what is the impact on the surrounding areas. If you look at the 911 incident, there are not less than 7 buildings that is totally damaged around it. Let's look at international heritage buildings. All right, those are the fire phenomena. Now let's look at what happened if a heritage building catches fire. This is a Korean World Heritage Nanamun Gate. They call it the South Gate of Korea, which is right in the city center and is the pride of all Koreans. And it went up in flame because the upper half of the ancient gate, that is 600 years, is completely built of timber with tiles and all that. And it was built in 1392. And it was destroyed in fire. And the way we look at it, I've been doing a lot of study on all the fire incidents. You wanted to forget about firefighting, because once the fire started, most of these heritage buildings will be damaged, and you cannot build a replica because it just lost its art and historical value. You can see that down there, the gate that is built of stone or masonry actually stays around. All right, but anything that is combustible, highly combustible, wood and all that are all gone. So what is the lesson that taught us? That if you wanted to renovate any heritage building, try to use non-combustible material. This is the famous Notre Dame Cathedral, and is the pride of French. I visited this cathedral several times, and I love and admire the architectural features, especially the flying buttress, which is also used as a rainwater downpipe. And it's really a beautiful piece of art. The fire started actually during a renovation exercise. And it started on the roof, just in the middle of the spire. And then it actually, look at the timing, it started at 6:50, okay? You can see the timing that is very, very fast for the fire to spread. And this roof, lengthwise, is about 330 feet. Fire spread because inside is hollow, and the whole roof is made of wood, so the fire spread up very, very fast. 7:53, the spire collapsed. The roof also collapsed at 8:07. So from about 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it only took 1 hour to consume the entire roof of a few hundred years, made of fully of timber. It's actually beautiful, and it's going to take a lot of money to actually build a replica of the roof. I'll just show you how the fire starts. The spire is already gone, collapsed. Okay, the roof also collapsed. Luckily, the majority of the cathedral is made of stone, and so it actually withstand the ferocity of the fire, except the roof. And they call this forest, the roof. The French used to call it a forest because it's made of 800 years old of timber. Okay, so the entire roof is made of timber beams, structures, truss, and all that. And yet, they're all gone now. Now, can you replace it? Of course, the answer is no. It's because how can you go and look for an 800-year-old tree to come and build the roof? And the craftsmen are also gone. Do you know how much it takes to actually refurbish it? Estimated at 6 to 8 billion euro times 4.5. And during the first 2 years, to just strengthen all the structures, it cost the French government 165 million euro. You know how much or how many schools, infrastructure the French government can actually use this fund for. So it's very, very costly, definitely, on top of losing the iconic heritage building. Next, let's look at how effective are firefighting. So when the fire authorities were called, they came with their turntable ladder, all right, because the roof is at a height from the ground level. So a jet was actually used to actually introduce water into the roof, while another one is actually trying to cool off the surface of the building below. Now, if all of us always assume that when you have a jet, you can actually put out the fire, is that true? Look at the photo. Because of wind shear factor, most of the water was blown away. And I just actually read the latest computer simulation of the 6 different types of water jet that comes out of a nozzle. And they will tell you that 30% actually evaporated because of the hot air plume coming out, convection current coming out of the fire. Another probably 20% or 25% will fall to the ground because the water droplet size coming out of water hose is actually quite coarse, about 1 millimeter to 2 millimeter diameter. And because there's gravity, as they travel through the distance, they fall to the ground. So very little actually reach the source of the fire, provided your pressure and the flow rate is actually correct. Okay. This is another close-up shot, and you can see that the water never reached the fire source. So we should not actually fall into pretense that as long as we provide the active fire protection system, it's going to help. Because there are a lot of factors is never factoring during the design stage. We need a lot more research and with the data presented to actually formulate proper fire safety design. This is the famous Windsor Castle fire. Do you know that the Queen Elizabeth spent most of the time here? She make it her home instead of Buckingham Palace. And I was surprised that, you know, there's not much fire safety measures being introduced here. But I know that Queen normally during summer went up to Balmoral Castle in Scotland, Edinburgh. And actually, they put up a lot of modern fire safety measures for that heritage building, but they did it very, very skillfully, and they conceal all the detectors where you cannot see. All right, but for this particular fire, even though they can restore the building, unfortunately, all the paintings on the wall, ornaments, all the crystal light fittings, and all that is gone forever. They've lost a lot of heritage, definitely. Okay. Now, what is the crucial objective of preservation of heritage building? Of course, we have to look at developing guidance and preventive measures to avoid a fire. You cannot expect a fire to happen and hope for the best, because you do not forget that on top of a fire damage, the amount of water that is going to be coming from the active fire protection system probably end up doing more damage than the fire damage. And all this is not recoverable. All right. So to me, heritage buildings should look at a zero fire fundamental. How are you going to achieve that? All the stakeholders will have to actually sit around and really do a study and plan it out carefully. Okay, because once it's destroyed by fire, they're going to lose their cultural, historical value. And even if they're restored, it's just a replica. They're going to lose the status of heritage status. Okay. So what can we learn from the all these fire incidents? Non-combustible building materials always survive fire incidents. It's the combustibles that is perish. And so we really have to expect the unexpected with fire risk assessment. Now, fire risk assessment is not about following, checking against UBBL. That is fire auditing for code compliance. Fire risk assessment is a different ball game, a level up, whereby you really have to look at identifying, analyzing what is fire risk, what are the fire hazards, and how do you mitigate them. There are a lot of procedures, and it's a very complex procedure whereby competency will need to come in. Fire risk assessors need to be trained in specific aspect about properties of building materials, and also the behavior of each of these. When you're subject to different type of temperature, what kind of reaction and things like that. All right. So fire and smoke behavior may not be predictable. If you look at the modern construction that we have introduced so many combustible yet highly insulated material that fits green building index. In terms of conservation of energy, yes, I agree 100%. But if you look at what has happened in Grenfell Tower in UK, in the Middle East, do you know that all the what they call external cladding building in the UK that has similar system as Grenfell Tower lost all the investment values? It's now negative because whoever bought an apartment will have to bear the cost of removing the external cladding. Plus, not only that, every month they also going to engage a consultant company to do regular inspection to make sure that the fire risk is minimum. So both these countries are using insulation as the criteria for conservation of energy. One in the UK is to lower the heating costs during winter, while in the Middle East, they are going to reduce the cooling cost of air conditioning. Okay, but there are again better ways of doing that. Modern fire is more ferocious with high fire propagation rate. we have seen in all these incidents. And wind shear factor may affect firefighting effectiveness. This has not been actually deliberated in detail. And as the building goes higher, we all know that even our twin tower, right at the top, the pinnacle, do you know that due to the wind shear factor, it can move four-sided up to 1 meter. Okay, so that's why you notice that nowadays helipad is no more a feature because it's not practical to land a helicopter for rescue at high-rise building rooftop. Corrosion factor of combustion byproducts needs to be taken into consideration as well, because normally when you have a fire, we've forgotten about the air that has a lot of corrosive agents. And even though after the fire is put up, are you sure that all the what they call heritage interior will not be affected due to the corrosive agents? So conservation of heritage site, we have a lot of buildings that is beautiful. Okay, this is 300 years mosque in Moa, and they have a lot of features compared to the two high-rise buildings at the back. What do you think? They have a big ventilation area, and they let in a lot of lightings, and you can see the design is everlasting. This is another piece in Penang, and Stephen has talked a lot about the shop lots, which I can tell you, I always admire them when I go to Malacca or Penang, because you can never get tired of looking at the beautiful architectural features. In Malaysia, we also have heritage sites. Don't forget, other than building, we have beautiful sites. And Mount Kinabalu is one of them. And if you happen to climb to the summit, you can see this St. John's Peak, which I call it the face. It's very, very unique due to nature. This is the South Peak, which is not the summit. Okay, the summit is actually very ugly. That's why nobody take photo with it. So what are the fire risks we're looking at? If you really want to conserve or preserve a heritage building, you need to understand the destructive nature of smoke and fire, because fire generates heat, smoke intensity, toxic gases, corrosive atmosphere. They also produce carbon dioxide, water vapor, and carcinogen byproducts, okay, for occupants. So organic materials possess higher flammable index than non-combustible materials. Cellulosic natural materials like timber, paper, cotton, plywood, linens, they all burn. And synthetic materials also generated higher combustible, toxic, and poisonous carcinogen byproducts like PVC cables, plastic household items. So non-combustible building materials normally have good fire resistant properties. Or you can also use inorganic compound like calcium silicate, gypsum. What are the fire risks? High fuel load, timber flooring, roof staircases, like what architect Stephen pointed out, open staircases, no automatic fire protection system, lack of fire doors compartmentation, no compartmentation or for walls, building converted into public assembly risk category, or sleeping risk category of design, what they call signature hotels. And a lot of these converted for backpackers, which again, you've got a lot of people coming in. Some of them might cook in the room with a gas cooker that increases fire risk. Streets were narrow and lack of hydrant facilities. Majority could not comply to EVBA fire requirements. High heat and smoke index. Multiple ignition source, aging electrical wiring, induced short circuiting, no fire safety requirement for residential heritage buildings, right? And a lot of these are built 100 years ago, and there's no requirement because EVBA is only enacted back in 1984. Difficult to retrofit heritage building with modern fire protection system due to load bearing issue and space. And fire propagation is fast and furious because there are a lot of timber elements. Takes longer time to extinguish a fire because of all the restrictions. Water and stream effect may cause unrepairable damage. And talking about taking longer time is fire rescue department already declared that they can no longer respond within the standard international norm of 7 minutes. So that's why all the designated buildings are asked to actually upkeep their fire protection systems under fire services right, fire regulation. Structure is fragile to heat and water attack. Interior decoration may sustain permanent smoke corrosive damage. Now, for that is some of the drawbacks. Now, if you look at the preservation risk, damage to structure by public, vandalism by public, removal of artifact as souvenir by public, damage to building wall, floor, or finishes during renovation work, and damage to interior finishes due to wear and tear. And if you look at the 16th chapel in St. Peter Cathedral, they have to actually retouch up their ceiling of the work carried out by Michelangelo. Damage to structure by public, sorry. So many of the heritage building in Malacca and Penang is built and blocked back to back with no back lanes. And this is even more dangerous than narrow lanes, because if you have 40 buildings back to back, there's simply no access in if one of those in the middle catches fire. Residential buildings have a depth up to 60 meters. That is pretty long, far exceeded the maximum travel distance. And buildings were constructed of timber flooring and single timber staircase. We have already quite a number of fire incidents in the Chinatown in Kuala Lumpur, where there are casualty rates because once a timber staircase is burned, there's no escape. Buildings were built before enactment of UBBL, hence no fire safety requirements. Okay, and the restrictions. Let's look at the restrictions and the constrictions of the heritage building. Issue of invasive retrofitting modern fire protection system to heritage building. Structure not strong enough to take the mass of active fire protection. For example, water storage tank, pipe work, space limitation for new fire protection systems, pump house, clean agent cylinders, insufficient power supply facility to cater for heavy fire protection systems like pump sets, fire alarm panel. Modern fire system does not blend in with heritage style, and this is one headache. Non-compliance with UBBL, egress with fire doors, alternate egress routes. So what are the alternate solutions and mitigation measures that we can actually look at? Perhaps we should actually look at a national heritage building or monument detailed study with fire risk assessment to formulate fire safety policy. A guideline, I think, is only a beginning, but I think we have we should look at more details. And it should be separated to look at national heritage building or monuments against the more common general category of heritage buildings, like residential and all that. So this, I believe, is already being done and is to be published by PEM. So let's wait for it to be published. A middle-of-the-road solution may be necessary in resolving some technical and legislative issues for current projects, because if you change the occupancy risk of a residential into a sleeping risk or public assembling risk, then of course the fire rescue department will request that you follow or comply with the requirements of UBBL. But then if you look at the heritage building, they have their own rulings whereby a lot of things you cannot do. So instead of getting stuck because of the restrictions imposed from both sides, maybe PEM can start looking at in the middle of the road solutions so that a lot of these projects can actually go on to be approved smoothly. But anyhow you look at it, I understand the importance of the value of heritage buildings, but I think life safety should always be the priority, especially those with sleeping risks. Okay. Now, I believe that a lot of the buildings, if you convert them into public assembly building or for hotels, it is a requirement to have alternate fire escape route. It's unthinkable to actually look at a proper fire escape staircase to be added into heritage building, sometimes of limited space. Now, if you look at all the pre-war buildings, we used to use spiral staircase at the back, including my current office. I have one spiral staircase, even though it's 3-story. The only difference, mine is not a what they call a steel spiral staircase. Mine is actually a concrete type, which I think is not that expensive, and it also saves a lot of space, because what you want is actually for people to be able to escape or egress safely. If you wanted to go back to just complying with the requirement of a proper fire staircases, risers and threat ratio, whatever, I think it's going to be very difficult. All right, so I think we should start looking at what they call alternate measures, and as long as it fulfills the objective, why not? A lot of fire doors can't be changed, because if you look at, I'm also involved in the heritage group of IFE in the UK. They have a special interest group, and I've been sent a lot of information from there. And in the UK, it's so strict. If you are actually looking at preservation of a heritage building, and if you come across a door, and that door is, let's say, 400-500 years old, even though it's already been damaged and it needs repair or replaced, you just cannot change a modern fire door. So for Malaysia, perhaps we should be looking at a solid wooden timber door instead of a proper fire door, as long as this so-called solid wooden timber door can have a fire rating or fire resistance rating. Because normally solid fire timber door, any carpenters can make one that can fulfill 30 minutes easily. Don't even have to go to the lab, all right? Because I've actually looked at the, if you refer to the old UBBL, the dim to satisfy door, every spec is inside there. And all this has been tested with a lot of data in laboratory. So if you can get a solid timber door, I think it's better than cannot fit in a modern fire resistant door set. Sometimes it's too heavy. Sometimes you need to hack the wall, which is not allowed by the under the Heritage Council's regulation. If you have a lot of timber flooring, which is a threat, including a timber, what they call staircase, perhaps fire resistant ceiling is one of the answer. Make sure that you have a ceiling that actually can absorb heat, so that the heat will not be propagated should a fire happen. You need to provide definitely emergency lighting for egress, for life safety, including what they call exit signs. There are many ways to do it. Take a look at Japan, Korea, and now most of the what they call international airports around the world. You'll find that a lot of this is now being concealed on the floor. So it's not that what they call intrusive. Okay, you do not have to mount it on top of a door. You can actually do it on the skirting or on the floor. And I've always mentioned that what is the point of putting an exit sign, a close sign on top of a fire door, whereby if during a corridor, during a fire, under a fire condition, the smoke is going to accumulate on the ceiling and flow towards the exit, and all the close sign will be covered up. Why do we keep putting close signs on top of fire door where you cannot see them on the floor of fire? Extinguisher is definitely, you need to actually have it. They can actually probably be concealed in a cabinet so that it's outside, not so intrusive. And hopefully, we can then work towards conserving or preserving heritage buildings in the world. I know PAM has really put in a lot of efforts, including the rest of the agencies in Malaysia. Hopefully, IFE can also contribute towards as one of the stakeholders, and hopefully we can then make all the heritage buildings safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Tay, for a very insightful presentation. Okay, let me summarize a bit what was presented by Engineer Tay. Okay, he mentioned about the characteristic of the spread of fire. So that is something that we need to understand. And also he did mention about climate change and global warming has a great effect on the fire risk. So that is important for us to look at the climate change, in order to prevent one of the factor that can contribute to fires. Okay, and he has taken us to all over the world, to Shanghai, China, England, Milan, Dubai, Korea. That is very interesting to see Namdaemun Gate, 610 years old temple, and it was destroyed in 2008 fires. And also we have seen Notre Dame Cathedral on fire, and another insightful information from Engineer Tay is that accessibility of fire engine is very important. And also we have seen Windsor Castle in England was razed by fire, and all the artworks all gone. Okay, and another important point was on crucial objective of preservation of heritage building. So we need to develop a guidance and prevention measure to avoid a fire incident. And there was a lesson learned. We need to use more of a non-combustible material, and then we have to expect the unexpected with fire risk assessment. And also fire and smoke behavior is very unpredictable, so we have to be mindful on that as a designer. And modern fire has a high propagation rate, so that's what's happening to Grenfell, I think, in England, because of the use of material, aluminum composite panel, I think. And Windsor, this is another great effect that prevent firefighting, effective firefighting, and corrosion or combustion of byproducts must be considered. And then fire risk to heritage building that we have to watch out. Timber material. This is a very highly combustible material. And then also Engineer Tay mentioned about the lack of fire door and lack of hydrants, and then no compartmentations, aging of electrical wiring. All those things will be in the fire risk assessment. Yeah. So, and then another thing is no back lane and difficulty in retrofitting with modern firefighting system due to structural loading issues and all that. Those are very common issues found in heritage building, over 50 years old building. And again, just like Architect Steven, Engineer Tay also mentioned about the importance of fire risk assessment. So that has to be done, and it has to be reviewed regularly. And the last thing is about the exit sign on the floor. Yeah, that reminds me of the aisle marker in an aircraft. So they put it on the floor. Yeah, because during fire you have to crawl. Yeah, the smoke will be on top, so you have to crawl. So most of the death during fire, from what I've read, is caused by smoke. Yeah. Okay, I think we have come to the third section of the program, which is the Q&A. So we have until 1 o'clock. So it's about 20 minutes we have for Q&A. I think we can take a question from this Q&A tab. So if the question is almost similar to one another, I will just read out one question, okay? Engineer Tay and Architect Steven, you ready for this Q&A?
Yes, Dato.
Yeah. Maybe both of you can answer. Any question. I don't. I will not give a specific question to any one of you. Maybe if it's relevant to your topic, then I think you just take up that question. Okay, we start with question number 1 from architect Chu Heng Huat Chu. Okay, he asked, this question is about fire safety guideline. So he mentioned here it's an interesting talk. I would like to know about the fire safety guideline. Will it be just a guideline? And when submitting drawing to BOMBA, they will refer to the available prescriptive bylaw. And who will carry out risk assessment in heritage buildings? Value, design, size, location are vary from one another. Okay, there's a lot of questions in one go there. So this question is similar to the one posed by Muhammad Faris Ahmad. How to be a fire risk assessor? What is the requirement? Is there any course of training available? Okay, so that will be the first question. Can we answer that first within 5 minutes? Maybe
I'll do it first lah. Then
yeah.
Tay can fill in the technical part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The guidelines. That's why we have all the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders at BOMBA, the local authorities, JWN and Batu Warisan as well, and also institutions of higher learnings. So we have a very good widespread of this. Now, the whole idea that we all work together is that, so this document can be a valid document that can be used across the whole of Malaysia, either whether it's a peninsula or both the East Malaysia as well. It remains a guideline because we cannot change whatever in the Uniform Building Bylaw or whatever law that is or rules that is enforced. So it's a guideline to tell you what alternative ways and of looking into it, and so that when you do your submission, the things are already in place. In this guideline, we also try to introduce templates at the end, form a checklist and template which could be agreed by all stakeholders. So there's a need of a special report. Who and how it's going to be done will be explained in the guidelines. Whether we need special competent assessor, we will also be talking about that, because we try not to be too exclusive to a particular group of people to do it. Unless there is a concern, then we will probably look into that. We try to be as inclusive as possible. That means people who are engineers or who are competent to do assessment, sure, they can do the assessment. So that still been in the pipeline to be considered, how and what and who are the competent people. So because like rightly pointed out, all buildings, especially the older buildings, they are all unique. Even next door to each other, they are also very unique. If you have been to inside that, next door is different from the next one. The best it gets is 3 or 4 of them are similar. After that, they'll be all different. The layout is all different. Or it's right now has been after all the years, it has already been modified, renovated. It's even a bigger fire risk without them knowing it. So yes, I think competent people like architects, engineers can do the assessment, because there'll be a checklist, and the risk assessment is a report. That means you have to report the materials that you will meet. Even the species of timber you have to identify, because certain timber burns super fast. Some timber, like for a lot of old buildings are chengao, they can withstand the heat, the fire, and stand longer. So that will help in the evacuation in the fire. So Mr. Tay, you want to add any further thing?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I think like what you pointed out, all these buildings could be different. Maybe the community can actually look into categorizing of these heritage buildings into different risk group or risk class. And then from there, you can then look at okay, what are the items that can be standardized? And certain class where low risk one, I think you can easily, what do you call that, coming out with certain guidelines or checklists or whatever. But if you're talking about a higher risk group, I think you still need a competent risk assessor. Now, what happened in UK now is that, do you know Grenfell Tower got a fire risk assessor's report before this? And yet, after the court case, they find that he is not having the sufficient knowledge to actually carry out his job. And of course, there are other complicated matters. But what I'm saying is that risk assessment is not only about the heritage building. It's about actually looking at the potential of fire risk, the fire hazard, and also what are the new materials that is to be introduced into the building under renovation. So are all these materials or all these systems being actually quantified or analyzed? If not, you only look at the current premises. And if you think that is good, then I think the phase 2 of moving new materials, new system into the building could have actually added onto the risk and the hazard that is already being pre-assessed. So then we're going to look at who this particular, because UK used to deregulate, and that's why they end up into this stage. It's so loose that anybody can do the job. So then who is going to be responsible at the end of the day? So I think, I'm not saying that it should be inclusive, it should be exclusive, but it should be inclusive. But rather that we need to actually train these people who are going to do the job. You know, it should not be any Tom, Dick, and Harry, even though they're qualified. That's what I'm saying. So we give them the proper knowledge, teach them the way to do it, and then at least they can do the jobs with competency. So I think this one need to be further deliberated. We leave it open at this stage.
Yeah, so thank you. We go for the second question. This one posed by Mr. Xiang Li. Okay, he mentioned here that in Japan, there are many timber constructed heritage buildings, but their approach to fire safety seems to be different from ours. Two features that stand out are, one, a community-based approach where the community participates. For example, Gesho houses in Shirakawago. Traditional construction skill and material use are continued to this day through regular maintenance and renewal. Are this approach applicable to our Malaysian heritage building? So that is his question. So
okay, maybe I'll start again.
Yeah, no problem. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I'll show you some slides on those community living, like Sponsor Petang and some in Sendakan and all that. The quite prevalent even in what's that, Kota Kinabalu. I think it's quite prevalent fishing village, particularly along the coastal. These are all traditional. And even like Smelami was a burn, they have voluntary firefighting brigade there of voluntary. So these are all community-based firefighting units. So I think this is where I'm coming from earlier, that we need to train the local people, the residents themselves. They have organization chart and then well trained by the fire authorities on how to fight fires, how to identify fires, and also able to identify that what are the fire risk, high fire risk areas in that within the community. And once you establish that, then you have to practice regularly how to make sure the equipments work. You know, no point you have everything, then it doesn't fail to work. The motor fails, the pump fails to start, things like that. So you have regular drills to ensure that you know what to do. So basically, it has to be a community looking at this, because this will be the fastest way to actually fight the fire. Tay, any comment on that, Tay?
I totally agree with Xiang Li that community must actually be one of the very important stakeholders, because after all, it's their environment. So up to now, we have been talking about from the professional side of how I can do take actions into preservation of heritage buildings. But I believe that we should actually trying to look at starting a community group and also impart with them the fire safety knowledge and all that. Not only that, they should actually have their own organization to look at during a fire. How can community work together? For example, for those without the back lane access, they must actually help each other, no other way, because the fire authority cannot help them and nobody else can. They must help themselves. And if everybody's look out like a vigilante group, then I believe the fire risk can be further reduced. So perhaps Pam can take a lead in this, and because you can actually easily set up in Penang and in Malacca, you have a lot of members around in these two states. Let's get the community together. Yep. It's my proposal, because it's actually good to get the residential be involved. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's without doubt that community must involve themselves in this sort of situations. Not only fire, but other type of emergencies as well. Yeah.
Back to you, Dato.
Okay, we go for the third question. We have 10 more minutes. Okay, I'm going to combine this question. Number one is, any bylaws to indicate the minimum distance between each building, posed by Su Wei-xiang, and I'm going to combine it with this question posed by Sharifah Azimah. Are the usage of fire retardant paint been widely used and approved by Jabatan Bomba, especially on timber element surface? I've heard it is expensive and not really easy to get. Okay, the two questions combined.
Okay,
in
okay,
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, I will start off with the minimum distance between each building, because the nature of a heritage building is really existing. We can't move the buildings, and like the one we have is a zero back lane, and we can't ask them to chop off the back with a 20 feet, 6 meter back lane, which we cannot do that. Then also we have issues of there are certain buildings I know of, particularly I think Malacca there are some, and I physically know seen in Ulu Langat shop lots that are of earth construction, ramp earth construction party wall. Now that doesn't fit into our building code as anything, because it's a ramp earth. We don't know how you will react in the case of a high heat and all that. Whether it's ramp earth, and then with the reinforcements are bamboo. So where does the code comes in, and do we need to if you go by UBBL, it will not comply, but these are traditional and only a few units, so they make them more valuable, that we should preserve it. So we need to work around it and see how to preserve it, and then make sure that the fire do not spread to the neighboring or the collapse of this ramp. I'm sure there are various ways of to handle this. When it comes to the situation, that's why they were saying that we need competent people who understand the heat and also the material, the reaction of material to this heat. Each has its own properties. We can't move that. So the next question, I think, Tay, I think you'll be better to answer the
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Actually, if you wanted to look at fire retardant coatings on timber structure, first thing is that I do not think the Heritage Council will allow that, because you're tampering with the heritage building elements. Secondly, even if you apply the fire resistant coating onto timber surface, they cannot last forever. You need to actually look at different types of fire retardant coatings. Some of these, the lifespan is only for 3 years, some for 5 years. So that means you've got to keep treating it. So the cost is going to be very high. Secondly, you're changing the texture of the heritage building elements, and also it's not sustainable, frankly speaking. And because of the chemicals used, large amount of chemicals used in the fire retardant chemicals, for the fire retardant coatings or paints, more than 50% has been banned now by EU, because we are going green. Because we are going green, we're moving towards green, so a lot of the chemicals are now not allowed. Okay, in the fire resistant prevention or things like that, or conservation. So I think try not to go that direction, because it's not sustainable. Twin Tower came down because of the steel structure maintenance is not being done. The times are up. steel structure is very expensive, you know, the coating for steel structure to maintain the fire resistant capability, because steel structure lost the strength about 650 degrees C. So these are lessons learned. We should not rely on purely on just treatment. Okay, thank you, Dato.
Okay, thank you very much to both speakers. Okay, this question, I try to combine this question on the compartmentation. Let me see. Okay, posed by Sun Yu Fun. How to construct a compartment floor for heritage building if floor is timber, if existing floor is timber floor, and how to maintain the authenticity. And the second question of similar nature about the compartment is that I saw by this one posed by Lim Kin An. I saw a lot of shopping complex have open concept kitchen and no compartmentation design for the layout. Sir, is the open kitchen no need compartmentation if it has provided with sprinkler system? So I read out the question from Lim Kian An. So can the speaker answer to that? It's about compartmentation.
I think, well, the shopping complex doesn't come to play unless you use a very old building for example, like the Shines in Singapore. It's an old church that converted. And what happened is, but old building, I think compartmentation is very important. For example, we're talking about the 100+ foot long building lot, they call it a shop lot. So you need definitely need compartmentalization. So that you need an active system as well as passive system to overcome this. Tay, you want to take on?
Okay. Actually, I've been to some of these authentic Nyonya restaurant in Penang, and I think it's very interesting because the owner is so friendly. They actually took me for a tour to the back portion of the restaurant. They only got about 6 tables in front, and they have this very Nyonya style partition separating between the what they call the rest area or family area and the kitchen from the front restaurant. And of course, the kitchen is definitely open because this is actually built, is a heritage building. And if you look at the staircase, the flooring, all timber, and what I admire is that below the staircase, there are carvings. They got the architectural carvings with patterns, with flowers, which is actually very authentic. And the kitchen is actually at the corner with the gas stove and all that. But they also, because this building actually have space along the side, so they actually turn it into a dry kitchen inside, and they move the wet kitchen outside, which I think is very, very appropriate because now you're moving the risk to outside the building, separated by the perimeter wall. So compartmentation can be done in many ways if you can, but if you are talking about putting in a driver partition, fire-rated driver partition, it will spoil the fundamental of being a heritage status. So I still think that you should mitigate the fire risk by putting in properly first aid firefighting equipment like the fire extinguishers, which I shown, and that comes back. That's why it comes back to community project. I think we're going to teach everybody that you must have this in your house to cater for potential fire risk. And during any fire incident, at the beginning, it's always very small. Using a fire extinguisher, you can actually put it out. Why do you want to wait until it develops into full-scale fire? So if you can teach them to have that and then use it effectively, then you mitigate the risk. You do not need a compartmentation. I think we should not be looking at heritage buildings that is very old with the new UBBL ruling that we must actually enforce all the regulations. It doesn't work that way, okay? We have to try to look at multiple approach and see which approach is more appropriate for the current situation. Let me tell you something else. Do you realize that all the residential buildings in the Malacca that is built during Portuguese days, some of their wall is 12 inches thick? they're so much better than the current construction, the modern current construction in Kuala Lumpur. So I think passive-wise, they have actually did a very, very good job, the earlier constructors, contractors. And so let's look at it from a multiple approach. And if you can teach them the fire safety prevention method, I think it will serve the purpose. Thank you, Dato.
Okay, thank you very much to both speakers for the excellent talk. We have like 3 or 4 more questions, but it's of similar nature. But anyway, to all the participants, if you still have a question or something that is still lingering in your mind and you need an answer, you can send it to PAM info, and the secretary will try to forward to the both speakers, yeah, so that maybe they can answer it separately or personally, yeah. And also I would like to, because it's 1 o'clock already now, we have come to the end of the program, and thank you so much to both speakers, Architect Steven and Engineer Tay, for the excellent talk, and to the organizer, Tuban Architect Malaysia, and Garis Pixel, the official PAM program partner. They have provided our platform, Zoom platform. They have managed it amazingly, you know, very smooth. And also, we at PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee always strive to give a good feedback, up-to-date feedback to all members. And with that, I hope that we can see you again in future Heritage and Conservation Talk. So from us, if there is any shortfall, we apologize for that, and we always welcome a suggestion for us to produce a better program in future. And once again, for those of you who has not signed up, please sign up, because the screen already pop out now. Sign out code is on the screen. So that's all for today, and see you again. Thank you very much.
Okay, can we have a group photo?
Sure.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
There's none from Garis Pixel?
No, this is just for the speakers first, and then the technical team. Okay, one more, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and the tech team, which is just me. 1, 2, 3. Okay, one more, 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much, Dato, Engineer Tay, and Architect Steven.
All right.
Thank you.
Can you send a copy to the?
Thank you.
Yes,
to the
I'll
email?
send a copy to WhatsApp and email.
No WhatsApp, but WhatsApp with the resolution will be reduced. Send it to email.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Sure, will do. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Dato, thank you very much.
everyone.
Thank you
very much.
Engineer,
Bye.
yeah. See you
Sorry, we
again.
can't answer all
See you.
the
Steven.
questions.
See you.
Yeah.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Thank you very much.